Well, this particular address is going to be filmed, so David, I've got my good side.
You haven't got good
I haven't
side.
got a good side, I know. That's you and my mum that keep telling me that. Today I'm talking about imagination, sci-fi and spirituality. Now, sci-fi has always been one of my favourite things in life. It helps me to be able to understand who I am and where I am and the direction that I'm taking. In the last verse of the hymn that we just sang, it said, God is his own interpreter and he will make it plain. And I think that this is where the imagination comes in. It's to help us interpret and find meaning within our lives. So when we were at the GA earlier on this year, we had a most informative and interesting talk on film and spirituality in the John Rayleigh Beard lecture by the very Reverend Peter Francis. In this talk, Peter expressed how film and art in general helps us to understand our contemporary world, and if approached in the right way, can give us an insight into where we stand spiritually. Most of the films he showed had a religious bent of some kind, but it struck me that the theme he was talking about could quite easily extend to science fiction. So most of the films that he showed had this kind of a religious theme, had religious themes to it. But both types of film, it seems to me, employ our imaginations to deepen our understanding. I think that many of us have been taught at some stage in our lives, usually in our adolescence, that our imagination has no place in the real world. And as a religion that has prided itself on reasoning and on having a lack of superstition within its services, rather than other traditions which have maybe what is perceived as quite a lot of superstition, imagination has not really been perceived as a tool that we should use. And I should imagine that many atheists would also agree that imagination should have no place when we're trying to form our narrative for our lives. But the harsh reality is, friends, that without our imagination to think of new ways of being and succeeding in our world, we would probably still be in that hunter-gatherer stage in our evolutionary development. So imagination has an important place in our general development, in the general development of humanity. And I think it has an essential role in our spirituality. Now, this has been borne out in many of the philosophies of the past. One of the first people to posit imagination as central to the work of spirituality was a man named Ibn Arabi, or Avicenna, to give him his Greek name. He stated that there was an aspect to our being which he named the imaginal realm, or alam al-mithal. This is a meditative state gained through spiritual practice and conscious reflection. And spiritual practice and conscious reflection. And later on we see this work taken up by people like Corbyn, who was categorised as a classical Oxford Orientalist, who said, what he said about imagination was that we should employ our active imagination. There should be an active part of our imagination, a part of our imagination that's directed by our will. And that, in that way, it is a tool that can move us beyond the symbolic representations of the archetype. Meaning that in our using our imagination in a purposeful way, we might be able to greater perceive truths that lie on the periphery of our understanding. Now, when we're trying to grasp truths on the periphery of our understanding, this is usually done within religion through metaphor and stories and symbols. And we heard from the Gospel of Mark earlier, where Jesus first withers the fig tree and then says his sentence about moving mountains by belief. Now, none of us would probably believe those things to be actually true, but I think that what he's talking about is how we might employ our imagination. He's talking about, at first, when, in my mind, how if we have a negative perception of the world around us and indeed of our lives, that growth cannot happen. Hence we have the very stark symbol of the withering of the fig tree. And then we have that in contrast to when he says about the belief can move mountains, how having a positive outlook on life can achieve so many great things. And we see this present in things like The Secret, although I don't sort of agree with The Secret entirely, or affirmations where we get up in the morning and say, yes, this is the best day of my life. I am going to have the best day ever. When we do things like this, we can create a space for those things to occur. But when we're thinking about how rotten our lives are, how terrible our experience is, we kind of close down ourselves and contract. If we are negative and don't believe, then our hopes and dreams will never come to fruition. If we are positive in our belief, then all things are possible. Jung too, later on in his psychological approach to life, had a similar thought. He felt that our active imagination was an alchemical tool that aids our transformation to becoming more whole. And what does he mean by an alchemical tool? Well, alchemy was the supposed art of turning base metals into gold. And I think that when we're looking at it on the spiritual level, we're not talking about one matter changing into a different matter, a more valuable matter, but we're talking about how we might take some of our negative emotions, some of our negative narratives, and turning them into something wholly positive. How we can turn the lead of our unchecked narratives into the gold of possibility. So in this sense, our conditioning often prohibits us from seeing deeper, seeing a deeper meaning in our life. And it is our imagination that helps us to liberate us from the confines that hold us back. Our imagination can work in a couple of different ways. It's rather like a double-edged sword. One way, it can make our life worse. Another way, it can make our life better. It was also taken on by Rudolf Steiner, who had the underlying principle that children learn best initially through play. And again, this is an active, imaginative process. When I was at university, I had an argument really with one of my professors where he said, when talking about the Bible, he held the Bible up and he said, this Bible has its own inherent value, whether there's anyone there to appreciate it or not. And I said, well no, surely the inherent value of the Bible comes in and through the person engaging with it and how that might affect their lives. The same with any text, the same with any art, whether it be music or painting or whatever. He didn't really take my point on, and I certainly didn't take his point on, but I think it is when we bring the depths of our being to bear on something, then we can start to have a relationship with it. The imaginative process can start to take place, and we can feel ourselves widening in our vision. And for me, one of the greatest things that has enabled this in my life has been in science fiction, both in movies and literature. And I think there's something about science fiction that seems to stretch my mind a lot further than maybe some of the imagination that I might have to employ with the story of Jesus withering the fig, or telling us that we can move mountains with our belief. There's something about the paradigm shift into science fiction that means that I can experiment with my thoughts, experiment with my ideas. In science fiction, we see God as aliens and prophets, maybe as time travelers. The same themes are dealt with in religion, but within a new, pristine, untouched landscape, we're able to flesh out the meaning. We're able to really play with ideas of who we are and what the meaning of our own life may be. Am I the only person here to enjoy science fiction? That's what I'm wondering. Can we have a show of hands if you like science fiction? Oh, it's mostly a masculine endeavour, isn't it? Oh, not quite. Can you name some of the science fiction that's really kind of made you excited, or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Fantastic. Pardon? Hidden Planet, right, okay. With Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I think it exemplifies what I was saying with Marvin the Paranoid Android. Nothing ever goes right for him. He's not using his active imagination to make things better. So who else is a fan of sci-fi? I think I saw you.
No, I think it's 2001.
2001? Yeah.
I don't know what the is, but we have got ideas. So there's a knowledge, what's that, section where it goes with the high glory, the technicolor,
yeah, it opens out the questions, doesn't it? It opens out the questions. Let's have another sci-fi movie. What's that? Doctor Who. One of our favourite family pastimes, that is, isn't it, Jasmine? There's nothing better than sitting down and watching Doctor Who. Who's your favourite Doctor?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Matt Smith.
Matt Smith. My favourite Doctor is still Tom Baker, I'm afraid to say. I thought he was brilliant. Any other sci-fi movies? Star Wars. A classic tale between good and evil. And also, you've got it there. Can you lift up your magazine? There we go. We're such a cool church because we've got Yoda on the front of our magazine. Any other sci-fi experiences that anyone wants to share? The Terminator, fantastic. A Terminator, a messianic figure again, employed in that storyline. So many different types of sci-fi, so many different paradigms and landscapes to explore the nature of our being and where humanity is. One of my favourite sci-fi films is Blade Runner, and actually I probably like the book better by Philip K. Dick. And his book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which incidentally was taken on it's like a screensaver used by open source software that takes the algorithms of all the computers that are using it and puts it together and creates this most wonderful screensaver called Electric Sheep. Now, in Blade Runner, Roy Batty, played by Rutger Hauer, is an artificial person. He's not real. Or is he real? He wants to find out. He wants to confront his creator. So we can see in this particular film, there are themes of what it means to be a sentient being. What gives us value as humans? What makes us truly human? An absolutely incredible film. Or Frank Herbert in Dune. Now the films were awful. Much, much better in the book. But there again, we have a prophetic Messiah coming into the picture. And my favourite one of all which I read to you earlier, or read an excerpt to you earlier, The Matrix. The Matrix is so theologically rich, it's untrue. It really is. Have any of you ever heard of the Gnostic tradition? Yes, well, in the Gnostic tradition, there is a high Godhead beyond our understanding, beyond our reach, sublime. And then there's a lower God called the Demiurge, who steals power from the highest power to create a slightly stilted universe. Maybe the stilted universe that we live in. And this, in my mind, is the Matrix. And it also aligns itself with Eastern traditions as well. We move beyond the conditioning of our mind, which is the Matrix, to try and reach enlightenment, which lies beyond that. In the story of the Matrix, or in the script of the Matrix, as I read to you previously, Morpheus says to Neo, "This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed, believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes." Now friends, isn't this a choice that we are always making? A choice between the pain that often comes with a revelation of truth, or the willful ignorance, which can seem slightly more blissful at the time. Isn't this the religious endeavour that we all partake in? Whether to uncover the truth, or whether to turn our heads and not see it. Often, friends, this can be an imaginative process. All of us have reached points in our life where we feel down, where we feel that we can't move on, where we feel that we can't continue. And how do we do? How do we do it? How do we continue? We imagine a better future. We imagine that this is not all that there is. We imagine that our life can improve, and we imagine that our situation will break at some point. On the first service that I took here in this church, I quoted one of my favourite poets, Saul Williams, and he said, "My love is my soul's imagining. How will I love you? Imagine." And it strikes me that with science fiction, with music, with our interactions with one another, as we build our community, we need to do it from a place of love. And how will we be able to do it? To actively use our imagination. Imagination is incredibly important in the spiritual endeavour. We can begin to perceive those things that lay on the periphery of our understanding. My love is my soul's imagining. How will I love you? Imagine. How will we change and grow our church? Imagine. How will we support one another through the ups and downs in life? We imagine. How will we create a life of love and of peace? Imagine. The words that we had at the beginning of our service from Winston Churchill. You create your own universe as you go along. The stronger your imagination, the more variegated the universe. When you leave off dreaming, the universe ceases to exist. Let us create more life. Let us create life in abundance. Let us use tools like science fiction, poetry or music. Let us actively use our imagination in our religious life together. Amen. The offertory now.